I got it.
Okay, good. Here we go. So let's begin. We're starting with blue holes of the Bahamas. The Bahamas, a series of semi-tropical islands off the southeast coast of the United States, comma, which are home to some of the most unusual geologic formations in the world. So uh, essentially, what you want to do here is the Bahamas, comma, a series of semi-tropical islands off the southeast coast of the United States, comma. Um, you don't need which because the sentence is perfectly fine without the word which. So what you want there is after the comma, it should say are home to some of the most unusual geologic formations in the world. So the correct answer is B for number 31. Okay. When you put the which in there, you actually make it an incomplete sentence. And it should be a complete sentence right up to the colon. Okay. Now the colon is there to restate um, what we referred to in the first sentence as unusual geologic formations. The colon is a restatement, underwater caves known as blue holes. So remember why we use colons. We use them to prior to making a list of things, and we also use them when we're restating something that came before the colon. Okay, and in this case, we are restating geologic formations as underwater caves. Okay, so that's why the colon is appropriate. These vertical caves were formed over thousands of years. You can scroll up there, yeah. And their cold depths provide abundant clues to the island's past. Now you see where that apostrophe is? It comes after the S, and the reason it comes after the S is because islands is plural, right? The Bahamas are more than one island. So when you're doing a possessive plural, you put the apostrophe after the S, not before. Okay, good. During the formation process, comma, tiny grains of calcium carbonate separated from the seawater, period. That's a perfectly good sentence. These grains built up, then compacted, forming the limestone that makes up the islands. Now, question 33 is built up correct. Oh, actually, 32. We have to put in. Given that all the following statements are true, which one, if added here, would most effectively introduce the topic of this paragraph? Well, the topic of the paragraph is the formation process, right? During the formation process. So what we want is a lead-off sentence that's going to talk about formation. Okay. And if you look at your choices on 32, the first choice, F, the Bahamas were formed from calcium carbonate, a component of seawater. See that word formed, that verb formed. So you're starting out your lead sentence on your paragraph is referring to the forming of the Bahamas. Then the next sentence refers back to formation. During the formation process, tiny grains of calcium carbonate separated from seawater. So the correct answer to 32 is F. You start the paragraph with that lead sentence, the Bahamas were formed. Okay? Because that's what the topic is about. These grains built up, then compacted, forming the limestone that makes up the islands. The question is on 33 is should it be built up, are building, will build, or build? Well, here's the thing. Everything is in the past tense, right? These grains built up, then compacted. Okay, so it's in the past tense. So built up is correct. Are building, will build, and build, none of those are in the past tense. So for 33, the correct answer is no change. You want it to stay in the past tense. Over time, comma, rainwater permeated the porous limestone, but was trapped just above sea level, comma, buoyed by the denser seawater below. Okay. What was buoyed? Rainwater was buoyed. And it's a dependent clause referring back to rainwater. So after the comma, the dependent clause as it stands is buoyed by the denser seawater below, referring back to the rainwater. Now, that is a perfectly grammatically correct sentence. When you look at the other choices for 34, being buoyed because of adds all kinds of extra conjunctions and ing forms that are totally inappropriate. It being buoyed by, again, is grammatically incorrect. Doing it was, again, grammatically incorrect. So the only correct answer for 34 is no change. So that dependent clause referring back to rainwater is perfectly acceptable as, comma, buoyed by the denser seawater below. Jostled back and forth by tides, comma, the layer of slightly acidic, brackish water eroded limestone faster than either rainwater or seawater could alone. Now, when you look at 35, you see that they put dashes in before the or and after seawater. And my question to you is, are those dashes necessary? And my answer to you is absolutely not. They're inappropriate. The sentence is perfectly correct without the dashes there. So let's read it. The layer of slightly acidic brackish water eroded limestone faster than either rainwater or seawater could alone. Okay, so remove the dashes, and the correct answer to 35 would be D, rainwater or seawater, without any dashes. As the limestone eroded, caves formed. Now look at that first part of the sentence. It's a dependent clause, right? It's an adverbial clause. As the limestone eroded, it should be separated by a comma. As the limestone eroded, comma, caves formed. And if you look at 36, the choice that is correct is H, because it puts a comma after the word eroded, which is where it belongs. Okay? Over time periods in which the weather changed drastically. All right, this is 37. Over time periods. What time periods? Okay, we're not really being very accurate here. How is it? 100 years, 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years? What time periods? Okay, so let's look at 37. Which choice most specifically illustrates how long the cave creating process took? Because when you use a vague term like over time periods, you have no idea what the length of time would be. But if you look at the choices that they give you to replace that in 37, the only one that is accurate in terms of time is the one that refers to ice ages. Because ice ages, okay, last a few thousand years and are usually separated by 10,000 years for what they call interglacial or inter-ice age periods. So basically it gives you an idea that these things formed over tens of thousands of years. So the most accurate basically description of time period would be 37 choice B, between ice ages and the more temperate eras that followed them, sea levels rose and fell by hundreds of feet. So during an ice age, sea levels fall because the water is taken up by the ice. So sea levels fall. And then in between ice ages, when the glaciers melt, seawater rises. So that makes perfect sense. So replace what you see there by choice B on question 37. Between ice ages and the more temperate eras that followed them, sea levels rose and fell by hundreds of feet. This allowed the cave creating process to, now look at this wordy sentence, to be a process that repeated at different depths, hundreds of feet apart. So we have the word process twice in the same sentence. And you don't really need to do that. It's kind of redundant. So really what you want to do is get the redundancy out of 38. And the way you do that is to go to choice J. So 38, basically what you would do, what you'd say there is, this allowed the cave creating process to repeat at different depths. Okay? The reason why you don't need hundreds of feet apart is if you go back to the previous paragraph, slide back down, it already says hundreds of feet. See that? Rose and fell by hundreds of feet. So when you add hundreds of feet in the next sentence, again, you're being redundant. So the word process is redundant. The hundreds of feet is redundant. All you need for 38 is J, repeat at different depths. The roofs of many caves collapsed, comma, leaving the chambers beneath exposed. Okay, that's perfectly correct sentence, and there's no question there. Some of these blue holes open to small contained caves, others open to miles-long interconnected tunnels. Now let's see what they want for question 39, okay? Okay. They want to know what punctuation comes after caves. You cannot have no punctuation there because it'll be kind of a run-on sentence and it won't make sense. Some of these blue holes open to small caves, others open to miles-long interconnected tunnels. Two separate ideas. Guess what? They're two separate complete sentences. Some of these blue holes open to small contained caves. You could put a period there. Others open to miles-long interconnected tunnels. You could put a period there. You could have two complete sentences. What do we always say about the punctuation that can come between two complete sentences? We've been over this many times. The only thing that can come between two complete sentences is either a period with a capital following the period or a semicolon. In this case, a semicolon is appropriate because these two ideas are very closely related to each other, right? Some make small caves, others mile-long tunnels. So what you want after caves is a semicolon. And if you look at your choices, the only right answer to 39 is C, the semicolon, separating two complete sentences that are so closely related that use the semicolon to depict that close relationship. Okay, good. The telltale sign, oh, wait a minute, 40. Okay, let's go to 40. At this point, the writer is considering adding the following true sentence. At 663 feet deep, Dean's Blue Hole in Long Island, Bahamas, is a popular cave diving destination. Well, here's the deal. That sentence is totally out of place. And the reason it's totally out of place is because the whole paragraph is dealing with the formation of caves, not with the tourist attractions. The sentence is totally out of place in that paragraph. So we know right away that the addition should not be made there. So it's either H or J as an answer, both of which are no. Okay, no, because it offers a detail that is unrelated to the paragraph's focus on the cave creating process. So H is the correct answer. It's telling you about tourist attractions when you're talking about cave formation. So the correct answer to 40 is H. Okay. Next, the telltale sign of a blue hole is a circular patch of water striking darker than the water surrounding. What modifies an adjective? An adverb. Striking is an adjective. It can't modify darker. An adjective doesn't modify an adjective. So you need an adverb to modify an adjective. So striking needs to become strikingly. You need to add an ly, which turns it into an adverb. The telltale sign of a blue hole is a circular patch of water strikingly darker than the water surrounding them. Is them the right answer? A blue hole. You cannot refer with a pronoun. Well, nowadays you can use they, them as a singular, right? With the new political environment. But it's not grammatically correct. If you're going to have a pronoun referring back to a singular noun, blue hole, it needs to be not them, but it. It, singular. So if you look at 42, the only correct pronoun that refers back to the blue hole, singular, is J, it. So let's read that sentence through. The telltale sign of a blue hole is a circular patch of water, strikingly darker than the water surrounding it. And then there's parentheses. Darker water indicates great depth. Okay, that's fine. Divers have found the remains of turtles and alligators now extinct on the islands. Okay, You can't have a period after alligators. We're looking at question 43. The reason you can't is because now extinct on the island, stalactites and stalagmites from a time when the caves are above sea level and artifacts of early human inhabitants, that whole thing is a sentence fragment. So you cannot have a period and start a new sentence there because you're left with a sentence fragment if you start with now. So what you need to do in 43 is change 43 so that that's a complete sentence from beginning to end. And the way you do that is basically to remove all the punctuation. And I'll read it through for you. The correct answer is C. Divers have found the remains of turtles and alligators now extinct on the islands, comma, stalactites and stalagmites from a time when the caves were above sea level. Okay? So basically, the artifacts of early human intelligence. So you have three things listed. You have remains of turtles and alligators now extinct, stalactites and stalagmites from a time when the caves were above sea level, and artifacts of early human inhabitants. That's your list of three things. So all of that, okay, divers have found all of those things. It's perfectly fine to turn that into one sentence and take out the capital N in now and the period after alligators. So it runs very smoothly before the first comma. Divers have found the remains of turtles and alligators now extinct on the islands, comma, stalactites and stalagmites from a time when the caves were above sea level, comma, and artifacts of early human inhabitants, a list of three things that the divers found. Okay, let's move on. Hundreds of blue holes can be sighted off the Bahamas. Let's take a look at 44. Which choice most effectively suggests the shape of blue holes as described earlier in the essay? Now, if you go back, it describes them as round, right? Dark round spots. So if you look at the three choices, dots, well, first of all, no change. Second of all, dot the waters of, darken parts of, appear in. Okay. The only choice there that suggests a circle is G, dot. Because what is a dot? It's a tiny circle. So if you know that a blue hole is circular and you're trying to convey or suggest the shape, the only answer that you can use is dots. So it has to be G. So when you read this sentence, hundreds of blue holes dot the waters, let's see, dot the waters off the Bahamas. Dot the waters of the Bahamas. Hundreds of blue holes dot the waters of the Bahamas. So the right answer there is G, suggesting the shape. So far, most remain unexplored by divers, comma, owing in part to the danger of cave diving, period. Perfect sense. Often the only clue to the mysteries below is the tantalizing sight of dark blue water leading deep into the sea. Okay, good. So now we move on to question 45 as to where we have a sentence here now, and we got to find out where we want to add it. The writer wants to add the following sentence to the essay. In these depths, comma, fossils and ancient rock formations are incredibly well preserved. Well, which paragraph talks about what divers find? Whatever is preserved is what divers find. Okay, so we just went through the paragraph that talks about, slide me back up there, Minnie. Can you scroll me back? No, the other way, honey. Okay, good. So divers have found the remains of turtles and alligators, now extinct on the islands, stalactites and stalagmites, and artifacts of early human inhabitants because they're well preserved. So if you look at C, see choice C there on the left side, left margin of right before divers? C is where you want that sentence to go. In these depths, fossils and ancient rock formations are incredibly well preserved. And then you go on to tell what the divers have found that are preserved. Basically, fossils of alligators, remains of turtles, stalactites and stalagmites, which are basically calcium carbonate rocks, and artifacts of human inhabitants. All those things are well preserved at those depths. So if you're going to add a sentence about things being well preserved, it should be at point C before you list the things that are well preserved. So that's the correct answer to 45. Okay. Now we move on to our long passage, adapted from an article about Winslow Homer, His Melancholy Truth by John Parks. Now, Winslow Homer was a very famous American painter from the 19th century, and he painted a lot of scenes of people in natural inhabitants and natural environments. He also painted scenes of, later in his career, of water, of the ocean, especially the ocean as it collides with the rocky shore, and also people that earned their living from the water, from fishing. And very naturalistic painter, extremely valuable paintings. He's got paintings basically all over the world in the most prestigious museums on Earth. So he's a very highly recognized and valued American painter from the 19th century. So let's read the passage, and I'll kind of explain things as we go. The images in the paintings of Winslow Homer epitomize a peculiarly American 19th century world. Through Homer's eyes, it is a world in which people live in close contact with nature and natural forces, a world where landscape and ocean are viewed not as a paradise, but as powers and presences that can be enjoyed and whose threats can sometimes be overcome. And particularly in this later paintings, it is a world imbued with a stark and melancholy atmosphere. So he kind of gives you an idea that nature can be very violent and very powerful. And although people enjoy nature and they can make their living from nature, they have to have a very deep respect for the power of nature and how hard nature can make their lives. In 1867, 2 of Homer's canvases were chosen to hang at the Great Exposition in Paris. The artist spent 10 months in the city, which later proved to have a profound effect on his art. A large display of Japanese prints was exhibited in the same building as his own paintings, and the process of simplification that it revealed and the wealth of pictorial invention it provided made a deep impression on the artist. The influence of Japanese art on Homer's painting was immediately apparent upon his return to the United States. The weakness of earlier compositions is replaced by a boldness and lucidity in which simple shapes are massed into powerful designs. So he took this concept from Japanese prints of creating very clearly defined, focused shapes, and he used that in his paintings after that point, which gave his paintings a lot more power as he evolved as an artist. Although Homer's work in the 1870s gained strength, the artist continued to paint his genre subjects. In other words, topics that he was used to doing: tourist scenes, school children, and farm life. It wasn't until 1881, however, that he found the subject matter that would inspire him most. In that year, for reasons unknown, Homer went to England, where he elected to spend the summer at the town of Tynemouth on the coast of the North Sea. It is possible that he was searching for a town filled with the type of tourists and bathers that made his paintings of the Jersey Shore successful back home. But Tynemouth was also a community of fishermen who wrested their livelihood from the dangerous and unpredictable waters of the North Sea. So it's a much more hostile environment. The ocean up there can be much more violent, much more forbidding, much more dangerous. Moreover, the light and weather in that part of the world, so much farther north than Atlantic City, is much gloomier and more dramatic than that of the Jersey coast. It was there that Homer became enthralled by the dramas of the people who make their living from the ocean. The fishermen's wives staring out to sea as they wait for their men, the launch of the lifeboat to rescue sailors from a foundering ship, the agonizingly fragile fishing boats being tossed on angry waves. Again, dangerous, hard life, trying to make their living from the sea. Here at last was a subject matter that matched the artist's deepest feelings. The dynamic and dangerous relationship between human activity and natural forces exposed in this setting would occupy Homer for many years to come. On his return to America, he elected to leave New York and relocate to the rural town of Prouts Neck, Maine. Prouts Neck, Maine being way north of Jersey and being very rocky shores and a much colder, much more violent ocean. It was almost like Tynemouth, almost a similar environment to Tynemouth in England. The legend of Winslow Homer is that he left New York civilization to become a recluse on the coast of Maine. In other words, a recluse, somebody that likes to live alone and avoid people, okay, for the last 25 years of his life, period. In reality, okay, you got to scroll the other way, honey. You got to move it over, okay. In reality, the property at Prouts Neck, which included a large rambling hotel building, was purchased by his brother Charles for the whole extended Homer family. So he wasn't alone. The artist also built a studio with an ocean view just yards away from the family house. So throughout the summers, he could enjoy the company of his father, his brothers, and their wives, as well as the year-round guests of the many local people whose friendship he valued. So he was not a recluse. He went to Maine to paint, but he had a lot of people around him that he knew and loved. Homer continued to travel frequently, spending parts of the winter in the Caribbean. But the artist always lived alone. And when he was working, which was a large part of most of his days, he could be extremely short-tempered when interrupted. So if he was in the middle of painting and you went in and said, "Hey, Winslow, how are you doing?" he would get very upset and angry because you're breaking his concentration. The sea outside his window now inspired the artist to create what came to be known as his greatest paintings. This is like the height of his skill and maturity, the mastery of his art. The Maine coast is extremely rocky and prone to monstrous gales that, at their most powerful, can whip up the waves to 40 or 50 feet. Screaming winds can rip across the breakers, creating long horizontal trails of spray. So a very violent ocean. Homer rendered this sea, in other words, he painted it, with all the understanding of a painter who knows to simplify and synthesize, just like the Japanese abstracts. In paintings such as Eastern Point and Cannon Rock, the construction of the water has been reorganized into clear graphic shapes and strong directional lines that echo the Japanese printmaking that had such a lasting effect on his work. The rocks in the paintings are massed into powerful, almost flat designs, and the brushing has become energetic, as though feeding from the physical strength of the ocean. These paintings take on an abstract grandeur that has justly made them famous. They remain, however, haunting evocations of the eternal power of the ocean. Haunting evocations. In other words, to evoke in us, as we look at it, this feeling of awe and dread and almost fear at the power of the ocean. Okay? So that's basically Winslow Homer and kind of a description of his artistic life and his development as an artist. Okay, first question. The main purpose of the passage is to A, describe an artist's most famous painting and the experience that inspired it. Obviously, that's not true. The article is about much more than one painting. Explore the relationship between the natural world and the fine arts. too vague. Provide an overview of an artist's career and important influences on that artist's work. Yes. There's an overview of his career, and it talks about the effect of different periods of his life on his work. So C is a good answer. D, describe the work of artists who epitomized a peculiarly American 19th century world. No, it's not about multiple artists. It's just about Winslow Homer. So the only correct answer to 21 is C. 22, it can reasonably be inferred, meaning concluded, from the passage that which of the following scenes would most likely be the subject of a painting created by Homer late in his life? We know that Homer was obsessed with the ocean, especially the violent northern ocean, late in his life. So let's see which one of these choices fits that. A family strolling along the boardwalk? Incorrect. A fishing boat being violently pitched about on a stormy ocean? Yes. That was his subject matter later in his life. A farm nestled in the countryside? Nope. A tourist sipping coffee? Nope. He was all about the ocean. So the correct answer to 22 is G. Okay, 23. Based on the passage, the way Homer depicted shapes in his early work and the way he depicted them in his later work is best described as shifting from weak to powerful, sharp to rounded, dark to light, uplifting to melancholy. Well, you have to go back to paragraph 2. You really do need to go back, and you need to look at line 20. The weakness of earlier compositions is replaced by a boldness and lucidity. So the right answer to the question 23, is too powerful. Okay. A is the correct answer, 23, and it's right there in the text. 24. According to the passage, Homer felt fascination for the subjects that inspired him at Teignmouth for a short time. He abandoned them soon after. Short time, Homer found little commercial success with them. Long time, Homer regularly returned to Teignmouth to paint. Long time, Homer continued to be inspired by what he saw there for years. So it's clearly a long time, because the last 20 so years of his life, he was fascinated with the ocean, especially the northern ocean. So it's definitely a long time. And he clearly continued to be inspired by what he saw at Teignmouth. So the right answer to 24 is J. 25. According to the passage, the paintings at Teignmouth inspired Homer to create mainly featured A, scenes of tourists and sunbathers enjoying the beach. B, the interplay between the sea and the lives of fishermen and their families. That's the right answer. Remember the women looking out to sea, the launching of the lifeboat to save a foundering ship. Remember all of that? That's all about the people making a living from the ocean and the interplay between them and the sea. So for 25, the obvious and correct answer is B. Okay. 26. The passage most strongly suggests that the main turning point in the development of Homer as an artist was his F, discovery of subject matter that profoundly inspired him. G, sense of accomplishment at having paintings displayed. H, decision to spend winters in the Caribbean. And J, rejection of the belief that the world was stark and melancholy. Well, the passage suggests very strongly that when he found the subject matter that inspired him greatly, that he had deep, deep feelings about, which was basically the ocean and the wildness and power of the ocean and how it affected human beings who were trying to make their living from the ocean. That's really when he came into his own as not just a painter, but as a fabulous painter, a painter who is noteworthy for his 19th century work. So really, it was this discovery of the subject matter that brought him to the full fruition of his abilities as a painter. And the right answer, of course, is F there to 26. Okay, 27. Let's cruise over to 27. The author characterizes the immediate effect of experiences in Paris upon Homer's work as subtle. Homer continued to paint simple shapes. Dramatic. Homer's work became bolder and clearer. C, imperceptible. Homer's work didn't change much. Significant, Homer abandoned the subjects he'd been painting. No, what happened there was when he was in Paris, he saw these Japanese prints, and answer B is correct. Homer's work became bolder and clearer because the way that the Japanese prints presented subject matter influenced him. So he was able to take what previously had been kind of poorly formed, weak shapes and turn them into very bold, very clean, powerful shapes. So the right answer to 27 is it had a dramatic effect and made his work much bolder and much clearer. So the right answer is B. 28. The main idea of the last paragraph is that Homer's paintings of the Maine coast exhibited the culmination of his artistic skills. Well, that's true, right? His real masterworks, his masterpieces really came later in his life when he was painting ocean scenes in Maine. So F is definitely a good answer. G, Homer's paintings of the sea evoke the grandeur of the human spirit in the natural world. H, the most effective way to depict water in a painting is to use graphic shapes. J, viewing two of Homer's famous paintings of the sea had a lasting effect on the author. So none of those really makes any sense in terms of what the last paragraph's message is, except F. And if you go back and you look at the last paragraph, you can see he's inspired, and he painted what was known to become his greatest paintings. Okay. He rendered the sea with an understanding of a painter who can simplify and synthesize. And then they give examples of some of his masterpieces, Eastern Point and Cannon Rock. Okay. So these paintings take on a grandeur. So this really is, as I say, a high point, the culmination of his career. So the right answer to 28 is F. Homer's paintings of the Maine coast exhibited the culmination of his artistic skills. 29, the author speculates that Homer may have chosen to go to Tynemouth because he wanted to return to the place that had originally inspired him, expected to be able to work better without distraction, needed a break from the overcrowded Jersey coast, hoped to find the kinds of subjects he had depicted in some of his earlier popular paintings. And if we go back to the paragraph that talks about that, he did go to Teignmouth right here. It is possible that he was searching for a town filled with the type of tourists and bathers that made his paintings of the Jersey Shore successful. So there it is. He was basically, speculating. The author is speculating that he was going to Tynemouth to try to find similar scenes to what he had already painted. Can we go to 29? Question 29. Can we scroll up? There we go. So the right answer is D. Hope to find the kinds of subjects he had depicted in some of his earlier popular paintings on the Jersey Shore. That's a speculation by the author of this article. He doesn't know that to be true. But of course, Homer found something very different when he went to Tynemouth. It was basically the beginning of a love affair with the ocean. Okay, 30. The passage states that in Prout's Neck, Maine, Homer could be irritable when he was interrupted. It says that very clearly. So the right answer is J. When he was painting, if you went in and interrupted him, he got short-tempered. So J is the correct answer. Okay, that's a pretty easy question. So now we move on to our vocabulary list, which has some good stuff in it, and we'll talk about. If you could put that up, Mindy, that would be awesome. Aha, there's our vocabulary list. Okay, so I have you here, Abby, and I know you always look these words up, and you're pretty good. Who else do I have online, Mindy? Do I have Isabel? Do I have Jake?
Billy and William
And William's there? Okay, great.
and Isabella.
Anybody wants to jump in and give me a definition, they can do it. But of course, Abby tends to do it more than everyone. Okay, let's start with the first word, jostle. Now that T is silent. Jostle. What does it mean to jostle?
To push or bump roughly.
Yeah. So usually when you're in a crowd, if the people around you and you want some space or you want to move to the front, You'll kind of bump and elbow people, kind of push your way through the crowd. That's jostling people around you. So it's a very active kind of verb. Okay, good. Stalactite.
It's like an icicle, like
Yeah.
hanging.
It's a hanging tapering icicle. Looks like a cone. And it's a tapering icicle structure that hangs from the roof of the cave. Do you know what forms it? What forms it? What's it made out of?
Calcium carbonate.
Yeah, it's made out of calcium salts. So the water, as it's dripping, it carries the calcium down from the ceiling of the cave, and the calcium comes out of solution and starts to solidify. And those icicles, or what we call stalactites, are formed over many, many years. Now, stalagmites are very similar, except what's the difference?
They're on like the floor instead of the
Yeah,
ceiling.
they come up from the floor rather than coming down from the ceiling. But the truth of the matter is they're formed the same way. The calcium salts come out of solution, they come out of the water, and they gradually deposit, forming a building structure that looks like a cone. So you can have stalactites from the ceiling and stalagmites from the floor. And the way I always remember it is the G means ground. Stalag, the G in stalag means ground. So if you ever get confused, just think of the G as ground. Okay, good. Tantalize. What does it mean to tantalize?
To tease someone with something they could get.
Yeah, to tease them, to entice them with a sight or the promise of something that they can never obtain. You're tantalized by something. You want it, you desire it, but you can't get it. Okay, good. To imbue something is to do what? When something is imbued, what does that mean?
Inspire with a feeling.
Yeah, with a feeling or a quality, a sense. His rhetoric was imbued with a sense of seriousness. So in other words, he was talking about a very, very serious subject. So his speech was imbued with a sense of gravity. Right? So the word imbued it applies a feeling or a quality of state. It's almost kind of a spiritual thing. Okay. And so it kind of permeates with a certain kind of feeling. Okay, stark. What does stark mean?
Fair in appearance.
Yeah, like a stark landscape would just be like a desert or tundra or a glacier. Very bare, very simple, clear, sharp, complete, stark. There's also expression stark raving mad. Somebody who's stark raving mad is completely crazy. So you can use the word stark to also mean extreme or complete. But when you're describing something visual, it means something bare, a severe landscape. Okay. So you can use it in either way. Pictorial. Well, that's fairly self-explanatory. What does pictorial mean?
Relating to a painting or painter.
Yeah, something that's expressed in pictures or illustrations. He gave us a pictorial review of the seasons of the year. So pictorial review would just be a series of pictures of different seasons, right? So it's a pictorial review rather than a written review using language. Good. And we know what a recluse is, but remember, Winslow Homer was not a recluse. He lived with his family. But what is a recluse?
Someone who lives alone and tends to avoid people.
Yeah, he prefers to be solitary, he or she, and he avoids other people. There was a guy who went up to North Alaska. He was like 40 years old because he got sick of human society. And he went up to a very, very remote part of the cold wilderness, the northern forests of Alaska, and he built himself a cabin and lived there for the last 40 years of his life all alone with no human contact. He hunted animals for food. I think once a month he would go to a local store and get supplies. But everything that he did alone. And he just preferred it that way. He was a true recluse. Okay, an evocation, related, of course, to the word evoke. What is an evocation?
recalling a feeling or memory to the mind.
Yeah, it's a strong image in the mind, a strong memory or feeling that's been created. So when something is evocative, that means it brings out in you a strong feeling. It might be evocative of, I don't know, regret, evocative of your sense of joy, evocative of things that are beautiful, but it has a strong effect on you. So a beautiful work of art or an excellent work of art will always evoke a response in you when you see it. So it's for something to be evocative, it has to stimulate you in a certain way to make you feel a certain way. It gives you a kind of an experience. It evokes something in you. Okay, good. Embezzlement. That's not a good thing to embezzle. Don't ever do that. What is embezzlement?
Financial theft.
Yeah, basically you're stealing money that you've been trusted with. So for example, if you're a cashier working for Walmart, and every time you collect cash from a customer, you put $5 in your pocket, that's embezzlement. Or let's say you're in the billing department of a corporation, and when you take the money to the bank at the end of the day, you just take a little bit for yourself before you deposit the money in the bank. That's embezzlement. So either money you're trusted with or money that it belongs to your employer. Usually embezzlement involves some kind of business, it's occupation. Embezzlement is not like going into a store and holding the store up at gunpoint. That's robbery. Embezzlement really refers more to a white collar type of crime where you're engaged in some kind of a work and you sneak money away from its proper place, usually over a period of time. Okay, that's embezzlement. Now we have picked two good words. The first one is tantalize. And tantalize is a great word because, does anyone know where the word comes from? Okay, you're going to like this. You're going to remember it too. It comes from a Greek myth. So there was a king. His name was Tantalos. He was a very powerful king, had a lot of wealth, but he was a sinful king. He was cruel. And the gods were not happy with him. So when he died, they punished him in the afterlife. They basically forced him to stand in a river up to his neck. And above him were branches of fruit trees full of fruit, delicious peaches and apples and oranges. Whenever he bowed his head to drink, the water level would recede. It would go down so he could never reach the water. Whenever he reached up to get the fruit, the branches would rise up and he could never reach the fruit. So Tantalos was constantly thirsty. Water was right there, but he couldn't drink. He was constantly hungry. All this delicious fruit was right there, but he couldn't eat. And based on that Greek myth of King Tantalos, we get the word tantalize. It comes directly from the Greek myth. Okay? So that's a good one to remember. You'll never forget that story. Once I tell it to you, you'll remember it forever. Okay, the second word that we're going to do is evoke, and that's from the Latin. And you've got to break evoke into two pieces. E is the prefix, and voke is the root. And they're both from Latin. E or X means out of, something coming out of. And vocare, V-O-C-A-R-E, means to call. So if you put E vocare together, it means to call out. And we talked about this. Something that evokes calls out something in you, right? So it's a sense basically of calling out spirits or calling out memories or calling out feelings, calling out something spiritual that is not like a solid object or thing. It's more of a feeling. It's more mystical. So E meaning to meaning out, and vocare meaning voice, to call out. Now, vocare is a root from Latin from which we get the word voice, right? Voice comes directly from the Latin vocare. How about vocal cords? The cords in our throat that we use to speak comes right from vocare. And how about revoke? What does it mean to revoke something? Does anyone know what revoke means? Revocation. It means to call back. So you got re, which means back, and voke, which is from vocare, to call back. So to revoke your driver's license because you were caught driving drunk, to call it back. So we see that word, that Latin word vocare, in very modern words like voice, vocal cords, and revoke, and evoke or evocation. Okay, that covers it, guys. So any questions for me? All right. Well, we'll see you next Tuesday, and have a great week. Learn a lot.
Bye.
Bye, guys.